The Navigating Disability podcast often discusses topics including disability, injury, mental health, and mentions of sensitive issues such as trauma and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care while listening. Welcome to Navigating Disability. Today we're joined by Cassie Day, a dedicated advocate, speaker, and founder of the Carer's Place. Cassie recently was awarded the Carer Achievement Award in South Australia. As a mum and full-time carer for her son with complex disabilities, Cassie knows firsthand the challenges and joys of caring for a loved one. Through her own lived experience, she helps other carers by providing support, guidance, and practical tools. Join us as we chat about her journey, the importance of carers, and how we can better support families in the disability community. Welcome, Cassie.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your life as a carer?
Well, I will try and keep it very short because it is long, right? I was a 23 years old when I had my first son, almost 24, and I had this kind of a mindset that I would have him. I would go back to work within 3 months. My partner, his dad, was going to stay at home. I had it all worked out, as the professional, young professional, and it
It was
just
going to
didn't
be
work out that way.
perfect.
It
Yeah.
was going to be perfect. Everything was mapped out, right?
Yep.
Except, life doesn't work like that, right? So I had Matthew, and for all intents and purposes, he, looked like a really healthy baby. Everything went well. But within 4 weeks, the first 4 weeks of his life, I had him at the doctor's a couple of times. Things weren't right. And long story short, he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at 4 weeks of age through the Guthrie test, so the heel prick test. At the time, there was no genetic testing for cystic fibrosis at the time.
How old is Matthew now?
So Matthew is now 23.
Okay.
And yeah, so obviously that turned our world upside down. We had no idea what cystic fibrosis was. We had no idea what it meant for us, what it meant for him. But as time went on throughout his life, we got a pretty clear idea of how we thought things could potentially go. For those of you who don't know about cystic fibrosis, it affects the lungs and digestive system primarily. And for him, he sort of, his lungs and his digestive system were impacted, and it's a progressive illness, right? So it's genetic and it's progressive, and it gets sort of more difficult over time. And there's a lot of therapies that he needs to have, and a lot of those have to be administered by me. So he would have 40 pills a day. He would have intensive physiotherapy 2 to 3 times a day, which is me like clapping on his chest, patting, and him doing breathing exercises. And but that's not sort of the whole journey. And obviously as part of that, I was his carer. I think he was 16 when I realized I was his carer, but that was after a whole host of other things had sort of come into the fore, right? So we now know that he is autistic. He does have ADHD. He's battled through debilitating mental health, but when he was 9, he fell 5 meters out of a tree, and sustained some really serious injuries at the time. He fractured his skull, like had a shatter fracture from the front to the back. He had a depressed fracture at the front. He fractured 3 vertebrae. He was a very sick boy. And at the time, I was interstate for the first time ever. My mum had my boys for the weekend, said, go have a break. I was a single mum. And so I got that call when I was away, which was pretty devastating. But that kind of, I guess, changed my perspective on life and what life might look like, and the perceptions we have, and that sort of thing. Tomorrow's not promised, right? Anything can happen. He can be taken anyway. And so as far as my carer journey, I look back now and I know that I've been a carer his entire life, and not just for him, but also for my youngest Josh as well. So he also has ADHD, but as a sibling of someone who has, extra special needs, it's pretty bloody tough, right? And
Yeah.
so that juggle is huge. And I've had bouts of caring over time with, family members, like long-term care, as far as, breast cancer diagnosis, heart issues. There's been a whole range of things that I've done in the carer journey. But like I said, it was sort of at the start of, or the inception of my business, that I realized, oh, I'm a carer. How about that? So
It sounds
interesting.
like, from what you've said, you've had a couple of different experiences of where your perspective has changed.
Yeah.
Can
Yes.
you take us back to the time when Matthew was first diagnosed? Did you have any idea what these disabilities were? No,
No,
you don't.
no, I didn't. I had absolutely no idea. I was 23.
No
Um,
experience with
no
disability.
experience, biology wasn't my thing in school. So, yes, I've had tough things that have happened in life up until that point, but nothing like this. And I just didn't know what had hit me. And so there's, such a huge learning curve in amongst the deep, deep grief
Yeah.
And that's
that
what I
you
want
Of
to,
what
experience.
could be. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I want to get to is I know that we always pull through because we have to.
Yeah.
But how did you move forward, from that diagnosis to
Mm,
then unwrapping all of the grief, as well as being there for Matthew and being the strong advocate that you need to be? How did you look
mm.
after yourself?
Oh, I wasn't always a strong advocate per se. Well, I don't think that I was, but these situations, we've got to do what we've got to do, right? And our babies don't have voices, and there's a couple of questions in there, so I'll just sort of steer me back if you like.
Go
But
for it.
that deep grief, even looking back now, like it evokes like this visceral response. You do move on and you do move forward, but you feel like at the time you don't have a choice. And I just remember crying and crying.
Please
I
cry.
don't, we'll
Okay.
cry with you because we're and this is
This
what
is what it's all
it's a
about.
raw thing. Yeah.
But I didn't get it. Like I looked at him and he was perfect, right? And so they teach you how to, like that, you have to pat your child, and there's this beautiful baby. He looks beautifully healthy. He's not coughing. He's not showing any signs. And I'm having to do all these things to him. I had to, make up apple puree and empty enzymes, so these little granules, and feed my 4-week-old baby these enzymes so he would digest his food. And, he was in immense pain. And you sort of look at him and you've got your own grief there, and it's like, I can't I can't fall into this because I've got this beautiful baby that I need to look after, and he's relying on me.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I'm really blessed with is resilience. And not everyone is gifted that, but I am very blessed to have that. So, I'm kind of the type of person that, yes, I will feel things really deeply, but I've got a really good ability to pick myself up, dust myself off, and keep looking forward. And whilst I might trip and fall, I do have the ability to sort of pick myself up. And of course, I had my mum at the time who was grieving with me, and I was just doing the very best I can, but everything had to change. And I had a partner at the time, their dad, who um, who was, I think he very much struggled with the idea of having kids in the first place. And don't get me wrong, he wanted to have Matthew, but his mindset was, um, you know, we don't want to bring him into this world. It's a horrible world, et cetera, et cetera. And so when Matthew was born and diagnosed, he had his mindset sort of went pretty dark pretty quick, and
His
he had
whole
him
world
six,
imploded.
yep, he had him 6
Imploded.
foot under before, you know, he had him 6 foot under, which was just really hard for me to get my head around. And of course, I expect that he had some resentment in that, you know, he ended up having to go back to work because I was breastfeeding Matthew, and there would have been some resentment there as well, because all of our plans just completely changed, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you think at the time that you were actually able to unpack all the grief, or
No.
did you pack it away and it came
Oh,
back later on? Because obviously it still affects you.
it still affects me. And I don't, you know, I don't sit in that space, but it does still affect me. And I think with deeply traumatic things for any of us, even if we have dealt with it, it will still, when you go back there, when you allow yourself to sort of go back and feel, it will bubble up again, and it will choke you up. And it happens quite often, you know, when I'm in speaking gigs or what have you, and that's perfectly human. But you're right. I also had the great ability to box things up, tie them up with a nice little neat bow, and pop them to the side, because I had bigger things to deal with right now. Down the track, and you're right, down the track, I sort of had engaged in, you know, various psychology and counseling and art therapy and those sorts of things to help process, you know, and I'm a deeply sort of reflective kind of person. So, you know, I do look at things, and I do like try and find meaning, and the light in the deep darkness, right? Because they're the things that keep you going, and Matthew was the light.
No, and I think as parents, we go into autopilot because we want to fix things, and in situations like this, we can't fix it. And I think that's a whole other thing that you need to unpack as you're going through it all. So it's a tough, and you know, your Matthew's dad, your partner, they don't deal as well as, and I'm not being sexist or anything like, but we deal with things
They're
different.
not equipped.
No.
They're just
And I
not
think
equipped
as
with
a
it.
mother, we kind of go, right, we go into fix it mode. What do we need to do?
Yes.
So it's a
Exactly.
hard situation for anyone to be in. But I think as parents, we adapt and we shift very differently in those type of or in any circumstance, really, when you look at it.
Absolutely. Like they just not equipped. They weren't born with or brought up with, you know, the ability to, you know, I guess, recognize and understand emotion and lean into it, and be supportive. Though, you know, it's that steely sort of exterior. And, you know, I think, you know, 23 years ago, Matthew was born in an era where there weren't support systems in place like there are now, you know, and we were two very different people. We're not together. The boys haven't seen him in a really long time, but I was, like you said, in fix it mode. I was actually like, give me all the information. I want to learn about this. What can I do? Because what I do now, knowing that what I do now will impact him later on in life. So if I can keep him as healthy and as well as I possibly can, then hopefully the outcomes for him will be positive. And who knows, you know, maybe, and this was my mindset, in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, maybe there'll be a cure or some incredible drug. Little did we know that, like, when he was 20, he did get that drug, which is just, you know, extraordinary.
And I have heard of that drug too, and it's doing amazing things for sufferers of CF.
So I can positively say that it saved Matthew's life. He was on, you know, 3 years ago right now, really. It's just past the 3-year mark where it was approved for the PBS. He was on the downward spiral. He was a very, very sick young man, and we were kind of, you know, feeling this is the beginning of the downward, you know. And, you know, he is living his best life, and now, and there are so many things that have happened and changed for him, and he's got this whole future that he never dreamt possible, because he was always a sick kid, and he was very unwell, and he didn't dare to dream, and we've got this future that we never dreamt that was potentially possible, because I was going to be, his intensive carer, until the end of days.
So what's his outlook now? Now that his life shifted and there's positivity and there is a light, what's he doing now with it? Like,
oh my gosh,
freedom.
I think it's important to say that, with something like this, there's a couple of things that happen. One is this, I can only assume it's like survivor guilt, right?
Yeah.
Because there are plenty that have come before that have passed. There are plenty that were too sick for this to have been able to make any kind of difference. Yeah. And then the third is this psychology around, just because all of a sudden you have a positive outlook on life, your whole brain, your whole being needs to catch up with that, right? Yeah. And psychologically, it's like, well, what now? I don't know, I guess I've been conditioned for him up until this point that I was always going to have to do this, and this, and I was going to die of CF, and there's no point in doing study or reaching for a career because, the end is nigh. Yeah. And so that takes a long time to, I think, get your head around. And Matthew didn't have hope, if that makes sense, when he was able to access Trikafta, because he's like, I've heard this before. What if it doesn't work and I set myself up and I have a big fall, which has happened over and over and over again. But within the space of a week, he went from coughing 24/7 to stopping. So it was like he couldn't breathe. He felt like he was breathing underwater, to the point where he could take a clear, deep breath. Like, it was just extraordinary. And so, for the years preceding that, so probably 3-4 years preceding that, between his CF and debilitating mental health, he barely left the house. He hadn't finished year 12. He didn't have friends. He couldn't go to the shops and to buy things or pick up the phone or do a video call or catch the train or anything like that. And now he's finished high school. He has a girlfriend. He has friends. He's studying, finishing his Certificate 3 in individual support. He's about to go and do work experience. He catches trains. He manages his own medical stuff. Like, he's just gotten his license, like his P's. Like, it's just outrageous.
I've got so many questions for you.
I've got sore cheeks from smiling.
And it's and I think those things were building there, and he had been ready, but his health was holding him back. And between us and himself and mindset and the drug and the NDIS and community and great people around him, these things have become possible. It's not just one thing, but it was, the medication was that the last thing, or the last piece of the puzzle that unlocked, right? And it's just been such a privilege to watch.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
There's two different areas I want to go back to, Cassie. One is your ex-partner, and we know that disability can take a huge toll on marriages and relationships and so forth.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the cause of your breakup, or was there more to it, or what impact does it have on relationships?
I think it was a catalyst. I think when you have children, your whole perspective changes, right, as a woman, and you grow up, and how you see the world. Exactly. And how you see the world and what you're willing to accept and not willing to accept change, obviously. Yes, I do think that it had an impact. Do I think it was the reason? No. So I think, their dad had issues with substance abuse and those sorts of things, and with Matthew's diagnosis and the pressure of all of that, and we, at that time, we had Josh as well. I think it all became too much, and I was afraid, right? I was afraid for our lives, and I was afraid for my kids, and so it took me 6 months, but I made the bold step when they were 3 and 18 months old to walk away. and it was something that none of us ever want to happen. But, my parents were separated, and I was so determined that that wasn't going to be how things worked out for us. But it was necessary. They weren't safe.
Yeah.
I wasn't safe. So I chose different, right? And I stepped out of it, and it was extremely tough. But, on this topic, the fallout of relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, relationships within family is like, I don't know if there are numbers. They don't capture numbers these days in terms of that, but I couldn't count on two hands the amount of people that I've lost. There is just so many. And it's, you talk about grief, that's a huge part of it, right? Because there's a lack of understanding. And yes, you will be protective, but people make assumptions, or you can't go to things, you can't turn up, and people think it's about them. It's actually got nothing to do with them at all. It's really about you doing what you can, or that your child's sick, or they can't be in an open place where there's smoking and or noise, or because there are just so many things. And so the less I was able to do, and the less we were able to go out, and the more I did in terms of protecting both of the boys and their environments, the smaller and smaller and smaller my circle became.
But I also think it's communication too, because when someone's faced with anything in life, there is distance because people don't know how to respond, or they don't. But it's just ask a question, be there for the person. And I think that's where it's lacking. It's the communication. People don't want to communicate. They're either scared, or they're, and it's just like, but if you just lend the hand and are you okay? Or is there anything I can do? It opens up a whole different narrative. But I think it's lost on people, unfortunately.
And the communication can be just simply being there and sitting there and holding space, right? You don't have to solve these problems. People don't know what to say. You're absolutely right. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And we are meaning-making machines. And by that, I mean there's this whole amount of assumption, right, that happens. If I don't hear from such and such, or if they haven't gotten back to me or whatever, it must mean that they're pissed with me, or they're,
I've done
whatever.
Wrong.
Which is just bullshit. But if we don't know as human beings, we make it up. And then it festers into something that potentially is not actually there. You're right. It's so communication. It's communication. From every side, and just like compassion and understanding. I feel like if we led with a little more curiosity, right, rather than assumptions and ego, we'd all be a whole lot better.
And the thing is, people in situations, they don't want people to fix it for them. They just want an ear or a shoulder, or, and again, just to hold space. We don't want you to fix it, because if I can't fix it for my child, you can't. Just be there and be understanding. And I think
absolutely,
it's horrible.
And I see it now even, and I notice myself, like, so for instance, I might see something on Facebook where there's a desperate parent or a mum, sharing what they're going through, and it's deeply traumatic for them, and it's troubling to read. And, your first instinct is, I just want to fix it and rescue, but you actually can't. You can't. And it is really difficult to know what to say or what to do, other than to reach out and say, I've got you, or I see you, or, whatever it is,
because it's also quite easy to offend people on those things as well. The other place I wanted to take you to was, you said before about before Matthew started taking this drug, how he was housebound and his mental health really took a dive.
Yeah.
How did you cope watching your son go through that? Because there's very little you can do.
Oh, like we said before, you want to fix everything. You actually can't. Best thing you can do is step back, I think, and give them space. And so it was the hardest. I actually think out of everything that I've experienced and that we've experienced, the mental health stuff is the toughest, without doubt. And I get emotional talking about it because it impacts and affects everyone and everything, and just want to, wrap them up. How did I cope? I did the best I could every day, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I think, for a long time, I sort of was not probably push. It probably felt like a push from him, come on, Matthew, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and that's more and more and more demands and pressure on him, which makes him feel worse and worse and worse and worse. And it also correlated with the time that I sort of started my business, and I worked from home for a very long time, and then I moved into an office space, and that was probably really good for him. But the biggest and the hardest lesson I had to learn was to step back and allow him to work through it himself. So be there and let him know I'm there, but without the push. And, sometimes when he would have, a complete breakdown, his walls would come down, and then we would just lay there for hours and hours and hours, and I would just let him talk, right? And he would just, it would all come out, and all the pieces of the puzzle would come together, but mostly there were a lot of walls. And it's hard. You can't fix it. You can't change people, right? You can just give them the best possible environment to help them work their way through. And for the longest time, Matthew wouldn't talk to anyone, and then he had a big sort of breakdown, and he agreed to talk to a psychologist. And my framing was always, if you can give it a go, if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Give it a go, see if it works. And then I would sort of say, so how long shall we give it a go for? Should we give it a go for 4 times or 3 times or whatever it was, so that he was in control of his choices, as opposed to me saying, you need to do this.
And it takes that level of pressure off as well. Like mum's
all of a sudden and all of a sudden he's got agency in his life, right? And so linking him in with this particular psychologist, he was so unwell that within 10 minutes he'd fall asleep. His brain just couldn't function in that space. That's how unwell he was. And it's taken years and years and years, but this psychologist helped him understand who he was, why his brain showed up the way it did, what it was doing to protect him. And just over time he became more accepting of himself and understood why anxiety was there. And they worked through such a process, and he still sees him now.
It's so
that was
important
tough.
to find that one,
the right one.
And
because
forever.
You just hang on for dear life, because they can be positively life-changing. And Matt's had one other person like that, who I hold in such high regard, who just saw Matthew as himself, didn't see him as a disability or someone to fix. He was just that side-by-side kind of mate, almost, I guess, is that a mentor that helped Matthew appreciate who he was, that he was a great person, and how much resilience he has, and how much he has to give to the world, and that he's valued, and all of those things. And that was certainly life-changing in that mental health space. But for mental health, I mean, and we as carers, we struggle with our own mental health, right? We just do. And when you get to the point where you've got no hope and no reason to get up in the morning, right, it's going to spiral, and you will sit in that. And I think one of the biggest things for Matthew was that one day he came to me after, probably a year of me really sitting back and going to work or going to sleep and hoping, going in to check his room to make sure that he was still here with us. That's how dire it got. But he woke up one day and came to me in the kitchen and just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I I want to learn. I don't know what I want to learn. He didn't have any interest because he was so dark. I don't know what I want to learn. I don't want to be around a heap of big groups or anything, but I don't want one-on-one. And so that gave me the permission to go out and search and seek
He just
something.
didn't want to be down where he was. He finally, something clicked.
Something clicked and he went,
He's
I'm
like,
done.
I'm
Yeah.
where I need more.
Yeah, I need more. It was huge, and it was a process, and I found a place. It wasn't quite right, and then they sort of said, I actually think that this might work for Matt. And so I sort of said, and it was this place called Youth Inc. So Young Youth Inc. INC. And they're an experiential entrepreneurial school in the middle of Adelaide. And they just meet kids where they're at, right? Kids who dance the beat of a different drum. That's where they go. And it's, kids from 17 to 25, right? And I said to Matt, look, there's this place. You can check it out if you want, but it's up to you. And we made an appointment there. We went in there, and he's, hunched down, head down, like it was huge for him to actually just get out of the house and go there. Like it was massive. And I had to do that step back thing again, right? So we're sitting in this meeting, 2 minutes into this meeting, and I can see, he's seen me as this powerful advocate woman who's going to like take down anything. So how can he stand up and speak and be himself? So I just sort of said, you know what, this is a meeting for you guys. I'm just going to step out, and then, off you go. And 20 minutes later, they walked out, and we had a walk around the place. And he walked out of that environment with his head up, his chest out, and for the first time, he started talking about the future.
He was empowered right there.
Yeah.
And it took 6 months for him to lean into that again, to start there. And he hadn't caught a train before, and he caught a train. And like when he got there, he would fall asleep, right? It was just so taxing for him. But over time, he kept going and he kept persevering because there was a reason, right? So as much as it was difficult for him and his anxiety and all of those things, he kept showing up. And, through COVID, masks were the best thing, right? So Matt had to wear masks before, but it was horrible because he stood out. Well, after COVID, he got to wear it, and he just looked like everyone else. And that was huge for him.
He wasn't singled out. Yeah.
He wasn't singled out. And so, but again, it is the hope, right? And giving him the space to learn and make mistakes and fall and have to pick himself up and prove to himself that he can do hard things and that he is worthy. And, because if you take over that as a carer, you take away their agency and their opportunity to learn that they're actually brilliant bloody people, right?
Cassie, you've been through so much on this journey. Who's been your greatest support? Because clearly you've been the greatest supporter of Matthew. Who's been there for you?
Yeah, I think different people throughout my life. And I really believe in the reasons and seasons and people coming in and out or staying in our lives.
Yeah.
My mum's been pretty incredible. I think, we've certainly had our ups and downs, but she's an incredibly resilient woman and really quite grounded. So sometimes she'll have to rein me in and tell me to get my shit together. She's been pretty amazing. I think for the last 12 and a half years, my now husband, the boys' stepdad, Marty, has been like my biggest cheerleader. And I thank my stars every day that he's come into my life. Like anything that I want or need, he'll be there. I mean, he's still a man that struggles to, understand emotion and all of those things, but he is constantly there for me and for the boys. I think one of the reasons that I ended up starting my business was because I struggled to have community or people to rely on or people who got it right. And so I created this online community, Facebook community called Parents and Carers Connect. And it was not meant to end up as a business down the track, but it was just purely for parents and carers to come together, share stories, you know, celebrate the little wins, the big wins, and everything in between. And, you know, share if they've, you know, been through a particular experience and maybe they can help someone else or what have you. If you sort of look back in those early years, it was really tough because after a couple of years, mum moved away, my sister was away, my dad lived away. There wasn't a lot of people around me. Matthew was born in a time where there was no social media, right? We couldn't go to play groups because of infection. We couldn't go to events for cystic fibrosis because of cross infection. Like, it was very, very isolating then. And so, you know, the rise of the internet and Facebook, I was just like as happy as a pig in, you know, because all of a sudden I curated this community, right, to help others. But in doing that, it helped me more than I think the other way, right? And I found some beautiful friends and people who we just got each other, and I think that was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start a business like that with those reasons behind, they're actually the best ones around, because you're with like-minded people. You're with people that get you and accept you. And you talked about the wins, celebrating the wins. The win might be a child doing a wee on the toilet for the first time, whereas for neurotypical or people without a disability, they're just like,
oh my gosh,
really? You know, but for us, it's like, oh my God, that is amazing.
Oh my God, I had a shower today. How about that?
I had a shower. That's right. I'm here.
Like,
I'm out of bed.
It's true. Like, those what you might describe as micro wins are huge.
Are huge.
Right. Are huge. And you're right. Unless you've walked it, people just don't get it. And that's the difficult part for our friends and family. And I've written a couple of blogs over the years. They're not up now, but I'd written them about, you know, as friends and family, how you can help without having to ask, right?
Because they don't know what to do.
No one knows. Like, do you when you're in the depths of, you know, deep in the mud, and someone says, oh, well, how can I help? I'm here if you need. Like, you don't even have the energy to pick up your phone and call or message, or even the capacity to think about what it is you need, because you're surviving moment to moment, right? You're just putting one foot in front of the other. Don't put another demand on me about something that I have to tell you to do, because I don't have the capacity.
Just come in and see. Just come in and look.
Just cook us a meal, or come and grab my washing, or, you know, take you know, the well child out, or whatever it is. Just, it doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't need to be money. Please don't donate money. Like, it doesn't need to be like,
really help. You just brought up, which is something I wanted to focus on too, about Josh.
Yeah.
The non-disabled or the normal, and I hate using the word normal.
No.
They really do get left behind and get left out. How can we support them better?
They do get left out, and they feel like that, and they do have challenges growing up that we couldn't even possibly imagine. And, you know, I remember going like to the hospital and knowing like that Matthew, because we would go 3-4 weeks at a time, 3 or 4, 5 times a year. And so Josh was separated from me. We were separated from each other, and he was younger. And like, my heart would break and his heart would break, you know, that separation anxiety. And I was more worried about him a lot than Matthew, because I knew me being there, Matthew would get what he needed. So I just think it's really important to preface with that, because they do it so tough. And unless you understand or you hear a story as how they do it so tough, right? You think a 7-year-old, 6-year-old little boy being separated from his mum, he doesn't see his dad for 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, and not knowing if his brother's going to be okay. You know, Josh saw the accident. Josh saw the accident with Matthew. He was there, and it's pretty bloody traumatic. So they suffer extreme trauma, and I don't think we realise that as parents. And so I think really early on, having that safe person, you know, we talked before, Kate, about having that that when you find that person,
You don't let
stick with
go.
them. And I think even though things might seem like they're just going well, whether it's an art therapist or a music therapist or someone that can hold space for the sibling, I think is so important. And to have that carried throughout their life, because it becomes normal. And so that when they are doing it exceptionally tough, it doesn't seem like out of the normal or a punishment, like, right, I'm going to send you off to, get looked at or whatever. It's just part of the normal. But I think it's also curating time to spend one-on-one with them and having, a special day, whether it's on a regular basis or whatever, where it's just you and them. And look, it doesn't have to be a whole day, right? I think quality time is more important than, quantity. And so, my kids I would read a story with them each night. They would both have their own stories and their own space. And, we would just have our special thing. Now, I didn't always do things the way that I would now, and that's the benefit of being,
hindsight and a few
having adult, retrospect is brilliant. But I think it is recognizing where they're at, that they are having a tough time, but also supporting yourself to be able to support them as well. So for many, many years, I didn't have any kind of support or therapy or anything that I had afforded myself. And I think if I had of, I would have been able to support Josh better as well. But it comes back also to communication with your family and your friends as well, and letting them know where things are at and that they do it tough and this is how. And if they're acting out, behavior comes from somewhere, right? So if they're struggling or they're acting out or things are happening that, there's not great behavior or what have you, that's coming from somewhere. What are they actually trying to communicate to us, and I think also the knowing that, and this is for me, and I think this happens for other people as well, but I felt like I could do absolutely everything for Josh, give and give and give and give and give, and it's still not going to be enough because there's that deep grief, right? So he wanted to be Matthew because Matthew got all the attention and everything, and Matt wanted to be Josh because he didn't get the attention. So it's letting yourself off the hook as well, I think, is so important, because what do we have control over? Ourselves.
And how is their relationship now, being older and Matthew's doing really well? Are they close?
I wouldn't say close. I think it comes in and out, right? Yeah. So I think once Matthew started getting out and about, they were really close. And, Josh was incredible. He took Matthew out. He took him out with his friends. It was pretty extraordinary to watch. But they've always sort of been in and out. Josh is, he's his own person. He's a bit like his mum. He definitely dances to the beat of a different drum. He goes out there and he, has a wonderful time with his friends, and he kind of forgets that, hey, we're a family over here, come back. But he's living his best life at the moment. But their friendship, their relationship is, I think, like many of us, it sort of has its moments. They are still highly competitive. Drives me crazy, but then they would fiercely protect each other, like just
which is what you want.
Protect each other. Exactly right. And so, if something was happening to Matthew, Josh would be the first in, to protect him, and vice versa as well. So,
and we can
humans are complex. Cassie.
We can attest. We've got 3 boys each, and they half the time want to kill each other, but no one else can do it, because then they'll step in.
Correct.
But they can treat each other like crap half the time, but no one else can. No. That's my job.
I think exactly right. You leave that to me.
Yeah, I think it's really important also to acknowledge that, resentment can creep in to
Absolutely.
and that feeling is okay.
It's real. Yeah.
It's real. Absolutely. It's real to them.
Yes.
And they're probably justified in it. So we've got to acknowledge it.
Oh, absolutely. And that does exist. And we talk openly about that. And we have talked openly about that, particularly after blow-ups, and we bring it to the fore. Like, absolutely, Matthew, of course you're going to be, jealous. And same for you, Josh. I know that you went through and go through a hard time because it's all about Matthew and you feel left behind. Yes.
Yeah.
But just bloody get on.
Just make my life easy, please.
Give Mama a break. Far out.
What are some of the things that you'd like to see change in society with the way that they view disability and people with a disability?
Oh, that's huge. Yes, there is a lot. There's a long way we've got to go in terms of policy, right? There's a huge way to go in terms of policy, in terms of including families and carers within, say, having a say, but also being at the fore in terms of like NDIS plans or care plans or whatever it is, because they're just left behind, and really it can be segregational, if that makes sense. Like, the carers or the well people in the family tend to not get a look in, and the person with a disability can be focused on. In fact, we don't live our life in silos, and so the recognition of family units and the affordability of, the government affording families support, holistic support through diagnosis and through that entire, life of a person having a disability is incredibly important, because I think we would enable families to be sustainable and to be able to be together, and less incidents of breakup and breakdown. I think as a society, it's going to be a really slow burn. I think there is a lot more awareness around disability, but the language that's used around it and the politicization of it needs to just go, right? It needs to be non-political conversation, right? And, and I feel like, I don't know about you girls, but I feel like there's a lot of resentment. So say from community or, local councils where they might be changing or evolving spaces to be more inclusive, so that we can all play or we can all access things regardless of what we've got going on. There's a lot of resentment there. People don't understand. And so we need to have more conversations. We need to actually be able to be vulnerable enough and to shine a light without being mad about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And again, it keeps coming full circle to open communication.
Open communication.
Just communicate without all the faff around it.
Yeah.
Just clear communication, because everything's up for interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think there is so much anger behind a lot of advocates, which I completely understand. But I don't think you build engagement that way at all. And so I think we can sort of look at different ways that we can talk about things, but also highlight, showcase, celebrate without the sort of the resentment or the anger. I think it would be really great for employers and for schools to be and just general society be given support from, whether it's the government, for people to be able to come in and have those conversations, to have that awareness and to build that knowledge and understanding, so that we can build an inclusive community, right? So one of the biggest challenges at the moment is, we know that there are so many people with disability who have the capacity and capability to work, but there are employers who are just bloody scared and they just don't know. And they don't have, they're not afforded any sort of concessions to be able to learn to make their work place accessible or anything else. And then they're demonized for not doing it. But, you know, a lot of businesses, they run at very thin margins. And so it takes time to learn. It costs a lot to train staff, you know, and train their whole staff about inclusion or about, you know, being inclusive with attitudes and you know, the physical environment as well. It costs a lot of money, and we need to invest in that sort of thing, because I believe that we have got so many more people who just might have a disability who are going to be bloody great workers if they're given the opportunity. But it's not just them that need the opportunity. It's, like I said, the employers and community and schools and further education places that need to be able to have the opportunity to come on board. And they're just busy doing what they're doing and doing the very best they can. But we all need to support that, right? I think employers can certainly be, again, demonized in, well, you should just be able to take them on. Yeah, well, that's going to take time, and I don't know what that means, and I need to learn that, and so do my staff. So I think attitudes is a big one.
Yeah, 100%. What does the future hold for Matthew?
Well, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. What I think, you know, in general it holds is a bright future, a long future. And, you know, that really depends on what he decides and what he chooses. But, you know, thinking about that, it brings a smile to my heart, and it brings...
You can see it in your face.
Your whole face lit up at that point as soon as Kate asked the question. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, because
it's lovely.
It's like, it wasn't a promise. And look, we know tomorrow's not promised, but when we have hope, which we have enormous amounts of hope right now, everything seems brighter, doesn't it? You know, and for me, because I've gone through some of the tough stuff that some of us do in life, I do have an attitude of gratitude. And so it is those little things like daring, well, it's not a little thing, daring to dream, or, you know, seeing him walk out the front door with a set of keys in his hand and he gets in his car and he drives off. It's just...
I love that attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude. But yeah, it is a mindset, right? And I could sit in the depths of despair and think, woe's me, but really I've got so much to be grateful for. So much to be grateful for. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done if I didn't have my beautiful boys. I wouldn't have been able to help so many other people and their children. I wouldn't have been able to support, you know, businesses who support. But yeah, I just wouldn't be who I am today without those experiences. So of course I've got to be grateful.
So what is the final note? What does the future hold for Cassie?
I'm still working that out. Look, I will always be a people person and want to help and support, you know, hand up. I'm a very much hand up kind of person. And so at the moment, I'm learning a new way of being. I was diagnosed 2 years ago with autism and ADHD myself, and then sold my business last year for a whole host of reasons, and a lot of which we've talked about. And so I've taken a lot of time off to catch my breath and work out who am I when I'm not a carer, except for I'm always going to be a carer. So I've worked that out, but I'm learning a new way of being without having to be all or nothing kind of way. And, you know, that's interesting in and of itself, but I will continue to help people. I will share our stories, but also I really do want to share other people's stories and amplify that, because as we said, if you know, there's so much power in the shared story, and people's stories matter. They need to be told, and we can learn so much from them rather than from just textbooks. So I'm really driven to do that, and I've got a couple of ideas in terms of platforms that I'll use, but that speaking and just showing up every day.
Cassie, it's been an absolute delight to speak to you. Thank you so much for everything you've given.
And we look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
We will put all your details on the socials, so if people want to reach out, they can.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cassie. Really appreciate it.